I'll admit to a dream last night where I was talking to an empty room, so thank you for allaying that fear for me. Fern Lawn essentially focuses on improving the collection efficiency for commercial collections. I have an environmental smart cities type background, and I've been working in the Internet of Things or the smart city tech space for the last 5 years, trying to get new devices into the market. So it's provided a relatively interesting perspective on some of the barriers that are there for actually improving some of those processes. Just quickly on this, the OnePlus solution at the bottom is a compactor monitoring device devised to increase the yields of cardboard, for instance, in compactors for clients, to essentially increase returns for clients. The smart bin sensors are an ultrasonic sensor for litter bins, for front lift bins, for liquids, tanks, whatever they may be. Again, trying to decrease the cost of waste management for people and decrease the amount of overflows for people. And finally, BinShare at the top is a Fern Lawn owned business that we're developing, which is described last night as the Tinder of waste management, which I quite like. It's essentially an online platform for businesses to sell bin space and access to recycling equipment to other businesses. So it's trying to centralise facilities exactly where we need them, particularly underutilised resources that we have there at the moment. I'll go into BinShare briefly at the end, just to give you a bit of an idea of what that looks like. So, smart cities start with smart business models. Anyone who talks about smart cities will invariably talk about sensors. They'll talk about platforms and communication methods. My message is that before any of those things are even talked about, we need the business model to actually support those things and the information that those devices will actually provide you. So what is a smart city? We'll hear a lot about it. My take on a smart city is this. I won't read it to you. But in the background, I can hear the sort of things smart cities do. So a lot of towns and cities provide places, outdoor dining, relaxing, lovely places for families and the like. And they're trying to decrease the amount of noise, the amount of congestion, the amount of danger to kids and families in their streets. So that's essentially the endpoint that we're looking for. Now, synonymous with smart cities is a lot of these brands here that you'll see. And it's business for them and business for me, but it's around, and I talk of this as someone who I've sat in BCC with Christine talking about smart bin sensors and what they can do for BCC. So some of these players are talking smart cities, and they're coming with very rigid, developed platforms for councils without any real regard for what the problem might be actually at the council. Often pitched at C-level management without any consultation with environmental waste management coordinators within councils, for instance. So there's this massive disconnect between what the technology providers have developed and they're trying to find the problem that suits what they've developed, and actually starting at the problem and working forward. So these guys will talk platforms mainly. So, the idea is, I think that the realisation they have is a local government person sitting in a booth with a portal that allows them to turn lights on and off and know when the bins are full to send the truck out, and to manage the smart parking so they can bill people when they're there for too long, and all of those different things. So the platform is the sales pitch largely. The communication, 3G, 4G, narrowband IoT, Sigfox, LoRa, all these different networks being put into the market at the moment. Lots of strong sales pitches put to local governments all over the country. And then there's sensors, people like me trying to sell sensors to help local governments change what they do. But at the end of the day, those sensors come in every size and shape and colour. And it's a market that's really quite cluttered in a way. It's new, but it's quite cluttered. But it's ignoring the problem. And this is where I'll get slightly, not controversial, but perhaps slightly blunt. Thanks to Cleanaway for the beer last night and Suez for the lunch, but I'll get a little bit cheeky. The problem with a lot of our commercial and local government contracts is that when we boil it down, the revenue of a waste company dealing in those areas comes back to the price per pickup and the number of bins picked up. So everything we're trying to do from a smart cities perspective that decreases the amount of pickups, it decreases the traffic and makes things done when they're needed, is butting heads with the profitability of the company that's there, that's invested to be in that business. So it's about trying to create a business model here where that doesn't butt heads at all, but the goals of the waste company and the local council are actually in unison, where we're creating those behaviours. The more profitable a waste company is, the more they follow the behaviours the council are looking for, the better the reward for the waste company along the way. At the moment, I think a lot of our contracts and our tenders aren't built for that at all. It's quite rigid. It's sort of, what would you say, aggregational, I suppose. It's just price per unit times frequency equals revenue. So often, you know, if I had a shopkeeper working in a store and their goal was to, if their bonus was tied to the amount of people that came in that door, they'd probably walk in and out of that door 300 times that day to try and get their bonus. But if we had more meaningful goals for that shopkeeper to achieve, then everyone would be happy and we'd get what we needed. So I think we just need to be looking at the way these contracts are done. I put this slide here as a little check, just so I'm not painting waste companies and everyone involved in the waste industry as being particularly bad. There are really valid reasons for the way that we get there. I've dealt with local governments all over Australia to see the backlash that you get when a bin overflows, the angry emails, the phone calls from councillors or whoever it might be, to really complain about bins overflowing or whatever it might be. And waste companies are trying to make a dollar, of course they are. If we've set up a construct where we're developing the behaviour that we don't necessarily want from a smart city perspective, but it's not the waste company's fault. We've actually created this environment where their path to profitability is often picking up empty bins. So how do we get out of this situation? So really it's about trying to create that market driver so that waste companies or contractors to local councils actually have the drivers that they want to see. So it comes back to, you know, what is the problem? What's the problem that we're trying to do? So are we trying to, I think this would probably count for most of our councils, are we trying to make them less congested? We're trying to keep our streets clean, quiet and pleasant for all those smart city reasons we discussed earlier. And we're trying to make sure our ratepayers' dollars are invested in more livable communities. So if that's the goal, how do we get there? So it's about having a shifting business model, a shifting contract with a waste company. And I'm sure there are some better ideas in the room than what I have. But the ease, putting bin sensors aside, the ease of GPS technology or any type of sensor these days, perhaps payment can be linked to the smallest amount of kilometres a waste company can travel within your CBD environment. It's like a reverse congestion charge, perhaps. Rather than a big stick, perhaps it's the reward of doing it, fulfilling the service of servicing bins that need it efficiently without adding to congestion and noise and risk and all of those things. Perhaps that's one way to get those. Perhaps it's $8 to pick up a normal bin now. Perhaps it's $12 a bin if it's actually over 75% full. And maybe they get paid $2 if a bin is actually less than 20% full and there's no real point in actually being there. But maybe we're overcomplicating it, and maybe the waste companies just need complete freedom to actually be given the problem and tell councils the best way to do it, to take bins out of action if they're not needed anymore, and to be rewarded for that honesty. To you know, rather than getting paid for a bin that's never used for a 10-year contract, perhaps it's getting paid in advance for taking that bin out with good evidence that it's not needed anymore, or perhaps moving it into busier locations. A lot of my background is procuring waste for the Department of Defence across Australia, and we used to say that the waste schedules were passed down through the generations. We had, bins, 4.5 cubic metre front lift bins at buildings that were never used and hadn't been used for 15 years, but the next tender had come around and that same service schedule would be rolled out to tenderers to answer them. So the question, the question being given to waste companies, it just wasn't pitched correctly. It was just promoting the wrong behaviours. So the smarter a city is, the more they're managing traditional problems well. And I come back to congestion and noise and all those things. And I guess what I'm promoting here is that before we talk to any of those providers I saw earlier, it's about really working out what the problems are in your town. Before you look at any technology, you want to actually, obviously start at the problem. So one of the tools that we have, it's nearly my protest vote of trying to make our cities a little bit smarter. We've developed BinShare so that rather than having to go to central locations such as waste transfer stations for everything, knowing what we know from putting sensors into cities all over Australia for quite a few years now, we know all these facilities are underutilised. Bins are empty. Compactors don't get used as much as they could. And we're trying to open up that market so that businesses can sell access to those assets to other businesses where they need them. So if a removalist has finished a job in Coffs Harbour Central, generally they might be going out to a waste transfer station to discard the boxes in the right way. The way BinShare is set up is that they'll look on the app, they'll put in Coffs Harbour and cardboard, and they'll see their options for actually managing that cardboard in a location that's good for them. So instead of spending the labour and the fuel and the carbon emissions of driving to the central area where we want them to all go, this is about trying to provide them with a ready place to use where they need it. So from a business perspective, they can get back into their work and it's less lost productivity. From an environmental perspective, it's win-win from our perspective. We're still diverting that material, but there's less carbon emissions and congestion on our roads. This is just a sample of some of the marketing that we'll be putting out there. We've built the system and we'll be launching in the next month or two, looking for some partners. This is a little bit like Planet Arc's Recycling Near You, but in a platform that's commercial. What I'm hoping is that businesses can make money out of aggregating recyclable commodities in small portions. So it might be containerising soft plastics, baled soft plastics. It might be particular alloys people are after, but it's about aggregating it on a really local level to make sure that there's money in it, to make sure that we're not eliminating any residual value by having a man in a truck motor through a congested city emptying empty bins. We're trying to make sure that those recyclables retain their value and have, I guess, we're trying to promote that circular economy in its own way. So last slide. What are the paths to smart waste management? So we've got to start at the problem, and the problem will be different in every local council, but I'd expect one of the problems will be everyone's trying to save money. Obviously we're in one of those environments at the moment where everyone's trying to save their budget. Does the current business model you have motivate all parties? Is it, if we can set up the right contractual outcomes with our subcontractors, well then the management of that subcontractor will become very easy, because they're if we can pitch profitability where we need it to be for the behaviours that we want, well then they're going to do it, because obviously profitability is a pretty motivating factor. And then at that point we just let staff and contractors do the rest. Thank you.